glad to see you. You all aren't college students, are you? I didn't think so. Awesome. That was a good year. You're middle school students? Like a GSA? Maybe make one? Very cool. That's awesome. Thanks for being here. So we'll wait for a few more people to come, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Does that sound good? Okay.
Are you going to do a lot of question answer
We have small group work.
interacting? Okay.
So I was actually thinking about, for the small group work, shifting to these tables over here.
Okay. If we have people report back, we'll just have them mic too for the captioning, if that's okay. And I can move that screen over.
Tell me more. Oh,
So the mic goes right into that mic, and that helps the captioner
yeah.
hear.
So how about if I make sure to keep the mic, and then if a student is saying something more than 2 words, I'll go over the mic.
Okay, perfect. That sounds great. That sounds great. Yeah, and I can do a mic running for you too if you need me to.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. I've never done a Huh?
Okay. It's not even, if you decide to move over that, I can just swivel the screen.
Okay.
We're streaming, so we're good to go whenever you're
Okay.
good to go.
I decided to represent. Nice. Thank you so much for doing that. I don't. This is fine.
We can give you a lapel mic if you want to do that.
I'm okay with
For
this.
the okay, all right.
Or when we switch, whatever you want. Whatever you want. Whatever you want.
You're very flexible.
Whatever
Thank
you
you
want.
for that.
Yeah. Should we get started?
Sure.
Do we end right at 11:15? Okay. Oh, okay. So lunch is after this, so we'll make sure to end near on time. So are you all ready to get started? Okay, so I see we have an awesome middle school group here. Do we have any college students? High school students? Okay, so most of the room is middle school and high school. So my name is Hope Wisniewski, and it's really nice to meet you all. Here's what I was thinking for today, but we can adjust if you all want. So what I was thinking was talking to you a little bit about advocacy, and then having you all move through a design thinking experience. Have any of you done design thinking before? Cool. So what we can do is I'll walk you through it and give you some steps so that you can actually learn to do this for your own groups. Design thinking actually is a method of brainstorming that was designed at Stanford, and now it's used nationwide to create strategic plans and to create like group process. So just for example, so I work now at the University of Denver, and I facilitated a design thinking for the women's rugby team, and then they're using that for their programming. I also facilitated it for a bunch of professors to make a curriculum. So it's just a process of facilitation that you can use. So we'll go through it today, and then if you want to try it on your own, just try it. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Let's see, I moved to Denver. I live in Denver. I came up here just to work with you all today, which is a really great opportunity. And I moved to Denver in 1998 to go to graduate school to become a social worker. And I did that. And afterward, I worked in the juvenile justice system, specifically with LGBT young people. And from there, I went to run Rainbow Alley. Are any of you familiar with Rainbow Alley? It's the after-school LGBTQ drop-in center in Denver. And then I started getting into nonprofit management from there. And then I did national policy work. So I worked for the Gill Foundation in Denver, which is the largest funder of nonprofit organizations doing public education to advance LGBT issues. And then from there, I worked at the Human Rights Campaign in DC, the yellow equal sign and the blue square. I'm sure you all see people around with car stickers. So for them, I did LGBT policy work around the country. And I've known Judy and Dennis Shepard ever since Matt was killed. And it's been really lovely to have known them for 20 years and do work with the Matthew Shepard Foundation. So for me, being here is a tie to the family and the work and the legacy of Matt. So I'm happy that you're all here today. So to jump in, I wanted to talk about types of advocacy just to give us kind of a grounding. I can't really see this. What can I look at? Oh, I can look at this computer here. So just to let you know that there are different kinds of advocacy. So one is individual. One thing that we do as social workers, or for you, like if you're at a doctor's office and you're not sure to come out to somebody and you have somebody who's with you, like a parent or a friend or a neighbor, having somebody advocate is really important on your behalf. So we oftentimes need somebody to be our voice. So just remembering that advocating one-on-one for an individual is really important. And then we also look at systems, systems level advocacy. Like for me, for example, I have a 12-year-old boy, but he wasn't always 12. He used to be like 2 and 3 and 4. And so when he was a little kid and he was in after-school daycare, they had a non-discrimination policy, but it didn't have anything to do with sexual orientation, gender identity. So I went to the director and I asked them to add it because I thought, I don't see my family represented in these policies. And so I made the ask. So I was asking not just for myself, but for all the families who might come ahead. So that was that actually changed the system, a small system, but it changed the system. So that's an example of system. And then policy, some of us think that gosh, how can I as one person make a difference in the policy world? Well, you actually can. Have any of you been home when somebody's knocked on your door to talk about a candidate? Or have any of you been involved in a safe schools process or seen a school board create an inclusive policy around transgender young people using the bathrooms that they need to use in schools? So these are policy advocacy opportunities that we can all engage in. The bottom line for me is don't be intimidated. If you have something to say it. And then talking about communities. Communities are often a place where we see advocacy happen, and communities, one example is in where I used to live, they wanted to build a road, extend a road through our community to link to larger roads. And our small housing community stood up and said no, because we didn't want all that traffic through our neighborhood, and it would have been right near a park where children play. And so we kind of came together and said, no, we don't want this road coming through. And it ended up working, which I was a little surprised at. And so finding your passion is really important, and that's what we'll kind of dive into for the second half of today. That we often have some kind of spark or some kind of reason why we engage in advocacy. So understanding what's important to you is a good first step when you dive in. I'm not going to read everything on the PowerPoints, because if you all want to look at it, you can look at it. And if you want me to share this with you later, I'm happy to. So this piece of how do we engage? Again, it tends to be a really personal process about how you might want to engage. Even just showing up. How many of you have ever showed up at either something at your school to make a statement, or walked in a march, or showed up in your community to support somebody else or some issue? Yeah? As an ally or as somebody who was affected. I know for me, a recent experience I had, I took my kiddo to the MLK parade and marched in that, and it was really impactful. And so for me, yes, it's important that I fight for my own community and stand up for LGBTQ rights, and it's also important for me to show up as an ally. So as a white person being in that space, there were other people who looked at me and were like, wow, thanks for showing up. And that piece is important for me. Some people like to engage in very personal ways too, like having conversations around the dinner table, trying to open people's minds by sharing stories about how we're different, and then through that finding out how we're the same. Some things to consider when you're choosing different ways to advocate or engage is the timing, how risky the topic might be, who else is working on the issue. Because imagine if there were 5 people working on the same issue independently versus if 5 people came together. Your voice is louder when you collaborate. So bringing organizations together to fight for a cause tends to work really well. Let's see. And then I just put a piece in here in case people were interested about impacting elected officials also. There's two ways to do that. One is grassroots lobbying, which tends to be, again, this theme of power of the people, where the people who are experiencing something in their lives that could be better through policy, like non-discrimination laws, for example. Like the state of Wyoming, you don't have your non-discrimination law does not include sexual orientation and gender identity. So that is a law that your policymakers could pass at the state level that would impact a whole lot of people's feeling of safety and their actual safety. So that's so an example of grassroots lobbying would be people writing postcards, people showing up and telling their story to their legislator about the issue of non-discrimination and why it's important. And then the direct lobbying comes in when you're actually saying, hey, policymaker, I'd like you to pass this law. So just in the last few minutes of this section, I just wanted to give you some examples. These are pictures of me doing different advocacy work in the field around the country. Some of these pictures are in Montana, and around the region. The work that we do in the field and inspiring people to show up is the work. Policies aren't going to pass if only elected officials are the ones making decisions. We as people have to influence those elected officials. So I hope that you see that you have a role in making a difference, and it might be today, it might be tomorrow, it might be in 10 years, it might be whenever the timing is right for you, but just remember that that you do have the power to make a difference. And from here, I thought that we could go through a process of thinking about advocacy through this design thinking model. So what a traditional design thinking process is if it goes from like thinking about what issue would I want to solve all the way to solving the problem. So for us, we're going to talk about advocacy. So I'm going to take you through this design thinking workshop and the rest of our time together. So could we, let's see, I think that we have enough people. Can we shift to these round tables so that we can have more discussion? So if everybody can shift, we'll move through the design thinking workshop over there. Oh, well.
So they're really excited about this.
Oh, okay, cool. What is it? They want to change what? Corporate school lunch? Tell me more. Okay. Okay, so what we're gonna work on, will you spread these around like 2 to each table? Thank you. Okay, can everybody hear okay? Okay, and so for the folks on live stream, feel free to listen in. I'm sorry if anybody's on live stream, obviously you can't participate, but I'll make sure to talk through the process. So where we're gonna start, so again, so design thinking is a really cool way to brainstorm. It's a nice way to generate ideas, and we're gonna start in these small groups in order to, do you all need pens too? I brought pens. Will you put a few of these on each table, please? Thanks. Okay, so what we're gonna do is start with a brainstorm. So we've got, and I need another helper. Will you put 3 of these on each table? Okay. So here's what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk through these questions. What's your name? Jack. Okay, Jack is gonna give each table 3 or 4. I think there's really 20 of them. So take a look at these question stems that Jack is passing out. And What you're going to do is you're going to answer those questions or similar questions. So you're going to put one answer per sticky note. So let's see, for example, what's the top question? Okay, how might we choose our policy advocacy? So how might we choose what we're passionate about? So thinking about it, so I might actually write the word passion on one sticky note. And then on the next sticky note, I might say talk to friends. And then on the next sticky note, I might say like a specific policy. What's the second question on here? Let's see. Yep, so I might say for that one, I might say show up as an ally. I might say create a program. I might say bring friends together. So just go ahead and one idea per sticky note, but have a conversation at your table about these questions. And you don't have to separate out which question you're answering. You're just putting answers, one answer per sticky note. Does anybody have questions, or does that make sense? All right, let's give that a go for like 10 minutes, okay? Okay, thank you. For the folks who are working on the school lunch piece, are the things that you put down on your Post-it notes, are they more general or are they very specific? Sort of specific. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna separate these two tables as a group, and then we're gonna separate out these two tables as a group. So we're gonna, 3 tables as a group. So we're gonna move through like this same process, but because they went really specific to advocate for a policy in their school, theirs will look a little different. So how many of you have any stickies on your table that relate to a structure or operations or like a specific structure that's needed? Like we need an organization or we need to figure out technology. Did any of you come up with something like that? Okay. What about resource needs? Oh, what? It could be, yeah. So you talked about that. What about, did any of you talk about resource needs? About time or money or technology? Did any of you talk about resources that you would need in order to be successful? More people, maybe? And how about some? Okay. And then how about programs? Like how many of you talked about in order to be successful, we need to create programs or we need to educate people? How many of you talked about the need to educate people? Okay. What other groups? So if you think about these sorts of things, so if you look at your sticky notes and if you look at your sticky notes on your table, actually, you know what would be cool? Let's do this. Let's take a minute and I'm going to ask these 2 tables to join. And I'm going to ask these 3 tables to join. And what I'm going to ask you to do is take 5 or 6 minutes, look at all your collective stickies in your large group and in your large group. Look at your stickies and try to categorize them. So try to think about, oh, these ones are alike, these ones are alike, and see if you can group your stickies into some themes. So let's try that. So let's physically move the tables closer together and create your large group and then your large group. Okay, so the goal is to have the conversation as you're moving the furniture, which is great. So the goal is to have the conversation, and what you're doing is you're looking for themes. So if you, for example, see 3 sticky notes, that's about influencing policymakers, or 2 sticky notes, that's about technology that you need. So does that make sense? What I'm asking you to do is try to group your sticky notes into themes and mix them between the 2 tables. And for you all, does this make sense? So look across your 3 tables and find your common themes and try and group your stickies in themes, okay? So I'll give you like 5 or 6 minutes to do that. Oh yeah, I'm fine. Is this yours?
Yeah, that's mine.
Okay, cool. No worries.
I think it's still on now, but it takes a while.
Thank you. Good job.
Okay. I'm going to give you like 30 seconds. So take any last stickies and get them grouped. Any last ones, get them grouped. Yeah, it's a fun process. So I'll by the end of today you'll hear kind of what like if we did a full blown thing about what it would look like. And so I don't know, do you have any students who you feel are just really like smart and great facilitators just naturally? Do you have some teachers or some student teachers who are also would also be great to follow? Okay. So maybe what we could do is what? Okay. Yeah, so I wonder if okay, I can do a Zoom with you and I could actually help draft an agenda that you could follow. Yeah. Sometimes it's just hard. Are you all about there? Okay, we're going to come back together as a big group. So, everybody have a seat. Good. So let's hear for this group with the general advocacy. What were your higher level categories? Who wants to speak? Anyone? It doesn't matter who.
Okay, so some of the some of the higher categories we decided on was government leaders. So we have to decide who in the government we want to specifically target, because if we know. Okay. Okay. Oh, is that okay? Sorry. Yeah, if we figure out who we want to target, that can make it easier because we know specifically who we want to influence, and they'll be more likely to pass that legislation or advocate for us in whatever, in the House, Senate, whatever. So that was one of the higher things that we wanted to emphasize, along with communication, because if you communicate to a specific group and you get your ideas across, or you learn what their ideas are about this policy, you learn about what their concerns are, you can get better insight on how you want to narrow your efforts. And so another big thing that we had was doing research. So if you research your issue, you know who's involved with your issue, you know current the policy that's surrounding your issue, you know what you want to do. Doing research on it will be helpful for you to focus on what you want to do, focus your efforts once again. And then another higher category that we had was passion. So if you're passionate about the topic, or if you engage people who are passionate about your topic, you can get more involved with your issue. You know the issue, you can more effectively lobby for it, or the government or whomever you speak to will be more informed because you know about this issue, you're passionate about it. And so another our final category was issue importance. So how important this issue is to you. So if it has to do with basic human rights, if it's a very pressing issue, it's something that you want to address right away, you're probably more likely to get legislation passed for it because it's an issue of basic human rights. And so it's something that you really want to address and want to make sure that people are able to be protected, I suppose.
Wonderful. All right. Well, you all did a great job. So the four groups that I heard were people, research. So people like buy-in, which I bet you all have something around that. Research. So making sure you do your homework and understand your issue before you rise up and advocate. I bet you all have something like that too. Passion. Of course, you have to have energy towards what you're going to fight for. And then issue importance. So ranking priority. We can't fight for everything all the time, all day. Even if we want to, because a lot of times we have to pay attention to our audience. So we have to choose what we want people to hear because people don't hear everything. Those are four really, really great categories. So let's move over here. who feels like you understand all the rolled up categories so that you can, okay, maybe what we'll do is have one person share. How many do you have? 3. Okay, so let's have 3 different people each share one of them.
Hi, can you hear me? So what we were mainly talking about is what is the policy. So okay. So on our so we need to raise awareness for school lunch, basically. Our second category was things that students can do on their own, like research and getting evidence and stuff, and then group organizations, so maybe like a club to do it, and stuff like that. So
All right, and our third category was adult help. And so like getting adults to help us with our problem, like so it's like I guess like we could have a bit more like power to get it actually done. So yeah.
Okay, great. So one thing that that I noticed, I'm curious if you see, is whether you had a specific policy or not. Did you see how much overlap there was in the discussion? Because I heard a lot about research, about really knowing your issue and making sure that you kind of have all of your points lined up, all your ducks in a row before. You can't go show up at a principal's office and say, I have this grand desire. Your principal is going to say to you, well, you have to come to me with a solution if you come to me with a problem. Same for a policymaker, or anybody else you're advocating, anywhere else you're advocating for change. If it's within your university system, you're not going to go to your chancellor and say, I need to make sure that we have more student spaces on campus. You would want to do your research first and demonstrate to your chancellor, we don't have enough student meetings. Every time I go to these specific places, all the chairs are full. So you want to make sure that you're coming to a solution. I noticed that there's this other space over here that's hardly used. So when you do your research, it helps strengthen your argument. Raising awareness, so that's community education. So we heard about that. So for you all, to change school lunches, who do you need to educate? You need to educate your entire student body, maybe other schools around you too, maybe other schools in your district. And rather than doing something just at your school, maybe it is something that impacts a broader system. You need to educate your school board, and you also need to start at home and educate your parents, because if your parents don't support the issues and they aren't speaking to like the school board on your behalf, you might not have adults in positions of power really listening. So part of it is being really smart about who are our allies. So for this group here, same thing. An example in LGBT specific work is that we often have straight allies tell journey stories. So for example, if we're looking at changing policy impacting transgender people in the workplace, I might pull in a coworker who's not transgender, who's maybe who can come in and talk about, well, when I work with this person, it doesn't matter to me what bathroom they use, and it doesn't impact our workplace at all. This person is equally valuable to me. So so listening and paying attention to how we best advocate and who can tell a story on our behalf. For me, on a personal level, this is something that I've really noticed over the past 20 years, but especially like 10 or 15 years ago, is the power of Judy Shepard, for example. As a mom who lost her child to a hate crime, the voice that she had was incredibly powerful, to the point where she was able to work with others to pass a federal law against hate, because there are millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of moms in this country who could relate to her in a way that created a whole group of advocates on her behalf and on our behalf as LGBT people who weren't there before because of her story. So thinking about who are the people who can best represent your stories. So as far as because we're running out of time, as far as the design thinking goes, so from here, what you would do is you would look at your rolled up categories and you would choose a priority or two, a place to start. It's really important that you don't take everything. You really have to choose a place to start, because if you're working on 6 or 7 things at one time, you might not have quite enough energy or quite enough people. So it's really important to prioritize. And that could be subjective. That's where the group coming together is really important. So I'm going to give you all just 2 quick minutes to talk in your group, because I'm really curious to hear. Why don't you rank number, like your top 2? So you all have 4 and you all have 3. So for you all, pick your one area. Look at just one area. And why don't you pick, so between your okay, I see a lot of energy over here. So look at your adult help, and what I want you to do is start to kind of design it. So I want you to, under your adult help, write number 1, number 2, number 3 in the order of importance, what you would do first, second, and third when it comes to engaging adult help. And for you all, look at your categories and maybe pick 1 or 2 of the categories and pick your 1, 2, or 3 of where you'd start. And this is a quick conversation just in a couple of minutes, okay? Have been what? Oh, cool. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Would you text me if you're really curious? Oh, I gave it to your student. I'll grab you another one. My cell phone's not on it anyway. It's oh, I'll grab you my card too. Well, I'll grab you my card. I'll put my number on it. Yeah, I know you took a few like action shots when I was engaged with them.
Yes,
That
I
would
know.
be
I never
fun.
get that. It's nice to have that when other people do that for me too.
That would be fun.
Uh-huh. It's good for people to say, "What do you actually do when you have?"
All right, you're good? Okay. Is this group back here? Did you all figure out your priorities? Okay, great. All right, go ahead and have a seat. Okay. Okay, who wants to share?
So we just focused on the research section, and we decided that the most important thing for research is asking the people who are affected what they need. And then the next most important, we decided that we should focus on like specific organizations and like ones that we and like research which organizations would probably be the most helpful to contact. And then the third would be talk to someone who is an expert on the topic and can provide insight on like what needs to be done.
That's great. I love that piece about the expert to understand what else is out there too, and then to also talk to your stakeholders. So I love that piece of going to your community. And for you all, totally relevant. You need to hear from other students about what they want. You need to find the consistent stories. Like, is it the pancakes with so many preservatives that they're hard every morning? So you know that when you eat them, they're not going to provide that much nutrition. So you need to learn from other people in your school about what their experience is. And then you also need to go to the experts and learn about food nutrition and what the alternatives are. So whether it's a policy, whether it's a big change like you're looking to make, that piece is the same. So that's really, yeah, you all did a really great job with that. And which area did you all choose? Okay. Who wants to quickly share your 3 priorities? You do?
So, we said for like adult help, like we said, raise awareness. Like first, do some policy advocation. Advocacy. My bad. Then then we said find our allies. So like, well, first we take it to professionals and get professional input, and then we said find our allies. So like find other schools that agree with us around the ACSD 1 school district. And then like finding like adults and that stuff.
So I hear the same exact theme of finding stakeholders, learning from your community. So in the interest of time, we won't be able to go through the rest of the stages, but I'm going to describe them to you. So from here, what you could do is actually evaluate. So think about which of the ideas that came up take a lot of resource, what takes a lot of time, what takes a lot of people, and that would help you figure out where to start. From there, so what we did today was a few pieces of this ideate phase, and then for prototype, for programs, it's basically developing a few programs. So since research and stakeholder input was common between both, I'll talk through that really quickly. So for to like prototype research, you would actually put on paper, you would design out what a program would look like. We need to learn. So you would put down like where you need to go, who you would need to talk to. So it might be policymakers, it might be doctors, it might be researching certain topics in articles. So you would want to actually start designing your programs. And then what you would do is test them. And you would test them, and then you would then see if you're hitting the mark. So you might test it and say, oh, well, we don't have the right information. We need to go to different people. So there's this piece of like iterating and reinventing. So I hope that what you saw today, first of all, is that you all have a lot of control and power to like pick something and see it through. Pick an advocacy area. For you all, I feel like you've taken on with passion this idea of shifting this school lunch idea, so like keep running with it. And I think for you all, it's a matter of just continuing to think in your personal lives as separate or as a group about what you're interested in working on, and just realizing that there is a method that you can go through to help you get to a program and implementation. The reason that I wanted to do this with you all and to talk you through this process is because I come in contact with so many people who have an idea And then so many people who have a vision of what they want something to look like at the end. It's the roadmap in the middle where we, like as a society, need more skills. And so this skill set of being able to draw the roadmap to get from idea to implementation is a really, really great one to add. So it's something I hope that you all play with. So I really enjoyed meeting you today and talking with you all today. So thank you for engaging. And after this, we'll go into lunch. So thanks for being here. You can keep them.
Can you share that document with me?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Why don't you write your email down on a sticky and I'll email it to you.
Oh yeah, Declan has.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. It was nice to meet you.